A sosit momentul interviului cu generalul american Ben Hodges, unul din cei mai reputați strategi pe care i-a avut Pentagonul în activitate și are astăzi un important ONG american, SIPA. Generalul Ben Hodges este un foarte bun cunoscător al realităților de pe flancul estic al NATO. A avut acces la informații de top în legătură cu intențiile Rusiei și dezvăluie astăzi de ce face Rusia ceea ce face sub ochii noștri. Care sunt intențiile în bazinul Mării Negre? Ce ar trebui să facă România? Și atenție! Avertizmentul generalului american, fostul comandant al forțelor terestre americane în Europa. Următoarele 3 săptămâni sunt cruciale pentru evoluția acestui război pe care noi toți îl dorim încetat. Nu vrem să mai vedem zeci de morți pe zi și sute de morți în gropile comune. Toate rezultate ale invaziei rusești în Ucraina. Dar informațiile și analizele pe care le face generalul Ben Hodges ne privesc direct pe noi, românii, și probabil e cea mai interesantă incursiune într-o analiză militară de excepție făcută de generalul american Ben Hodges. Priviți cu atenție. Doamnelor și domnilor, o mare bucurie să îl avem din nou invitat la emisiunea Punctul de Întâlnire pe generalul american Ben Hodges, fostul comandant al trupelor terestre americane din Europa. General Hodges, welcome and thank you for having this interview.
Thank you for the privilege, Radu.
It's a very difficult time for us, for the Western world, for NATO, and Romania is in the first front of this battle with Russia. What do you think about the Russians' intentions on the war in Ukraine and against the NATO and the allied territories?
Well, first, I think Romanians should be very happy that their leadership over the past few years has recognized the threat and has done what is necessary to help Romania be prepared to defend itself as well as to help other allies. So Romania and Poland together really are the kind of the hinge in the middle of NATO's eastern flank and play such an important role in the air, land, sea, cyber, so many different ways. So this is the strategic vision of Romanian leadership, and Romanian citizens are benefiting from it. This is a very dangerous time. Russia has shown who they are, which most people in Romania already knew this. I believe that it is their intention to destroy Ukraine as a state. Putin has said this years ago, that Ukraine is not really a state. And so I think he's going to do everything he can to eliminate any structure, any people, anything that looks like a Ukrainian state. That's why mayors are being kidnapped, infrastructure is being destroyed, people are being relocated, just the way Stalin did it. And of course, these atrocities that have come to light in the last few days, you know, it reminded me of Katyn, 1940, when Russians executed 22,000 Polish officers and intelligentsia. And then when I think about Srebrenica, 1995, where Republika Srpska forces murdered 8,000 Bosnian men and boys. It feels like those things again, and we need to be clear-eyed about who we're dealing with.
It's a war in Europe, and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that it's the most difficult time since the Second World War for Europe. Do you think that Putin will cross the red line and after he will somehow end this war in Ukraine, he will try to threat NATO soil?
You know, we are in the decisive phase of this campaign right now. I think the next 3 weeks will determine what happens. The Russian forces were beaten by Ukrainian forces. They failed at every single thing they wanted to do. They still, after over 6 weeks, have not taken Mariupol, which is incredible. How much those people have suffered there, but yet they're still hanging on. So Russia has not been able to defeat Ukraine. So there's no way they want to get into a conflict with NATO because they can't defeat Ukraine. Now, we need to think about winning, not just keeping Ukraine in the fight. We, the West, the United States, NATO, European Union, all of us need to talk about winning, not just keeping Ukraine alive or preventing Russia from winning. What do I mean? Winning equals minimum everything back to pre-24 February, everything. It also means that Russia finally is forced to live up to international law, respect its own agreements, so that Ukraine has access through the Sea of Azov, no disruption from Russian Navy or that big bridge. Respect for international law. Long term, Crimea and Donbass return to Romania. But in the near term, in the next 3 weeks, if we accelerate the delivery of everything that's needed, if we say we are in this to win, that this is our fight, this is not just Ukraine, this is a European conflict taking place inside Ukraine, then I believe Ukraine has the ability to break the back of Russian forces so that they never have the opportunity to launch a new offensive in the east. They're retreating, they're trying to reorganize, so that means across the border inside Russia, they're very vulnerable targets: fuel, ammunition, transportation, staging areas. These are great targets. And so if we give Ukraine the intelligence to identify, and if we make sure they have the weapons to hit those targets, Russia will never be able to launch
what kind of weapons
offensive.
Does the Ukrainian need?
Well, the Ukrainians are asking for, of course, what they already use: the 152 millimeter and 122 millimeter artillery rockets, long-range systems. Of course, more drones that would be able to go that far. These are the kind of weapons that will break the back of Russia and prevent it from ever getting back on its feet. The Russians are brutes, they're evil, but they're not stupid. And they will eventually figure out what they've done wrong, and then their mass will begin to take effect. So that's why right now, 3 weeks is critical time. Otherwise, Ukraine begins to run out of ammunition also. And so we lose this opportunity. And then for sure, this will go on for months and months, maybe even years. It will be difficult for Ukraine to get their economy back up without Mariupol and Berdyansk. This will be very difficult. So there's a lot at stake here.
General Hodges, until today we believe that Vladimir Putin, Sergei Shoigu, Valery Gerasimov, those are great military strategists. And now we see, after 45 days of war in Ukraine, that they have a huge military failure in a much smaller country than Russia.
Yeah. So I guess we finally now really know what the Gerasimov doctrine is, which is to smash cities, murder civilians. He is the new Mladic. Okay, that's Gerasimov. He's not some distinguished old general. He is Mladic. It's his soldiers that are murdering people, innocent civilians. We should be clear on that. Just like Lavrov, one of the biggest liars in history. Even he today still denies what the whole world knows is Russian atrocities inside Ukraine. Shoigu has been the Minister of Defense for, I think, at least 8 years, maybe even 10 years, at least 8 years. 8 years as Minister of Defense. And what has he produced? What he has produced is the latest in decades of corruption inside the Ministry of Defense. Billions of rubles have been spent, but they do not have a quality force. They're not trained. Weapons and equipment are not working. The logistics is inadequate for what they wanted to do. The command and control network obviously is terrible. And so most of the credit for this failure goes to Ukrainian defense. But for sure, Russian forces not trained, not ready, not prepared, no experience, undisciplined. You know, they have no sergeants. They have those NCOs that make things happen down inside the unit like we in the West do. That's so obvious. When you see tanks are all jammed up like this, or trucks, that means they have no discipline. That means soldiers are terrified, and so they get close together. If you had sergeants, they would be making everybody spread out. This is what we know this. It's incredible. All the advantages that Russia had, they've not been able to use any of them except the long-range weapons. That's the only thing that they've used to effect.
There is this theory, General Hodges, that if Putin and Russia will fail to conquer and erase Ukraine from the map, they will use weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons or chemical weapons. Do you think it is possible?
Well, of course it's possible, but I think it's extremely unlikely. We should respect the danger of a possible nuclear weapon being used or a chemical weapon. But I ask, when I hear people talk about this, well, why would they do that? I mean, for what purpose? A tactical nuclear weapon, a low-yield nuclear weapon, it's still a nuclear weapon, but it would not cause any more damage than what they are already doing with explosive weapons. And I imagine that the people at the other end of that long table where Putin sits, that they're thinking there's going to be life after Putin. They hope there's life after Putin. And they've got to know that if they employ a nuclear weapon or a chemical weapon inside Ukraine, that puts things in a whole different category, and it will be, in my view, impossible for the West not to get more directly involved. We should respect the danger, but not make our policy based on an exaggerated fear of that danger. And that's what we're doing right now. The 30 nations of NATO, with all of our advantages, are not able to influence or stop Russia, which, if not for its nuclear weapons, we would smash it in a week. So I think it is time for the United States to lead the alliance and say, we're not going to stand by anymore. No more Srebrenica, no more Katyn. We are going to get involved. And it doesn't have to be troops on the ground. I met President Zelensky 7 weeks ago. He said, I don't need soldiers. Just give me the tools. Finally, I saw today that the UK is going to provide Harpoon, which is a badly needed weapon system that can hit a Russian Navy ship. Right now, they're just sitting out there launching missiles into cities and murdering civilians. So giving the Ukrainians the ability to hit a ship, that would make a big difference, and of course, to protect Odessa. So to finally come back and answer your question, I don't think it's likely. There's no battlefield advantage, and there's no good outcome for Russia if they use a chemical weapon or a nuclear weapon. I don't think they will.
General, what NATO must do on eastern flank? Because there are some voices saying that battle groups are not enough, that we must reinforce, maybe to deploy the whole NATO response force on the eastern flank. And then comes the great offer and the great statement from General Mike Miley, Chief of Defense, the American Chief of Defense, saying we are thinking to ask the request from Romania and Poland to have permanent U.S. military bases on their soil.
Yeah. Well, and I hope what Chairman Milley says, I hope that does come true. I was wrong. I used to say, no, we should not do permanent basing because of NATO-Russia Founding Act, to respect that. And because so many of our allies also opposed it, and I thought preserving the unity of the alliance was so important. I was wrong. The good faith effort by NATO to respect NATO-Russia Founding Act, there was no benefit to any of us. There was no good Russian behavior in return. So clearly, I was wrong, and we need to have permanent basing. But this is a policy decision. What's needed is a strategy for the Black Sea region. The reason we care about Ukraine, the reason we care about Romania, is not just because we love the people and we love the history and we love the culture. It's because of where they are on the map. And the Black Sea region has huge strategic interest for the United States. It has huge strategic interest for NATO. Number one, 3 NATO countries are in the Black Sea region. We have an obligation by treaty to be prepared to help defend them. So there's one reason it's strategically important. Number two, Russia, of course, uses the Black Sea as a launching pad for all of their malign influence in the Caucasus, in the Balkans, in Syria, and Africa. So for Russia to do all the bad things it does, it has to have access from its illegal base in Crimea. So we have to contain Russia in the Black Sea to prevent all those other things. Number three, Iran. The Black Sea with Turkey is a bulwark against Iran. So this makes it strategically important. And then finally, there is huge economic potential in the Black Sea as a east-west corridor between Europe and Eurasia. And Romania sits right in the sweet spot. If we invest in Romania and Ukraine and in Georgia, and if those countries invest, then the Danube River becomes so much more important for economics, not just for tour boats, but for economics, the way the Rhine River is or the Main River. But right now there's not enough demand on it. But if Georgia was able to build a bigger port, like they've talked about doing, and Ukraine is there as a friendly nation that's protecting the northern part, and if we repair our relationship with Turkey, then the economic development of the region, including Romania, would be huge. And then there would be more pressure to improve infrastructure in Romania. So there's so many benefits to doing it. But the United States and Europe need to decide that this region has strategic importance. If we do that, then it's much easier to make the necessary military arrangements, more presence in the Black Sea, permanent basing, improving the air and missile defense along NATO's eastern flank, getting the headquarters right, and finally, having coherence. Instead of enhanced forward presence and tiered forward presence, one solid, coherent flank for NATO. And when you have that, then you make much better decisions about the mission command infrastructure, the logistics, the military mobility, if we have that coherence on the eastern flank. This is what I hope the alliance and what I hope the United States is going to do. This is why I'm here in Romania this week, is to help work on that. I'll be in Turkey in 2 weeks, advocating for these things.
General Hodges, Romania has the longest frontier with Ukraine, both land and also in the Black Sea area. If the Russians will attack Odessa, and if it will be conquered, they will make the link with Transnistria. How big is this danger for Romania, and what do you recommend to Romanian authorities to do in order to prevent a threat to our country?
So I agree with your assessment that this will be dangerous if Russia is successful in capturing Odessa. I don't think they can, but for strategic discussion, let's say they do. Or they at least have their Navy out there pounding away on Odessa, so you got Russian Navy inside Romania's exclusive economic zone. This is a problem. It makes difficult for economic purposes for Romania, energy exploration, Constanta, all of these things, people will be concerned about the region. So there's a negative problem right there. I think we have to watch very closely what happens in Transnistria right now. I'm sure that obviously Romania will not allow Russian aircraft to fly in there. I hope Moldova will not allow Russian aircraft to fly in there, which means they would have to fly over Ukraine, I think, to get into Transnistria. And if they do, Ukrainians should be able to shoot down any aircraft that might be going in there, I would hope. But this link-up that you're talking about, that would not be a good thing. Now, I think that when you think about, all right, what should we do? Obviously, continuing to support Ukraine's defense of the Odessa area to make sure that they're not able to get in there. But if we step back and think more broadly, what can we be doing to cause problems for Russia other than just giving weapons to Ukraine? And this is what I mean when I say we have to win. We have to think about collectively, we're going to win. We're going to crush Russia's ability to export violence anywhere. I'm not talking about going into Russia. I'm talking about outside of Russia. What can we do? Well, first of all, Romania should be working with other allies in the region, especially Turkey, to do freedom of navigation operations in the Black Sea. Okay? Turkey has finally closed, because of Montreux, they've closed the straits to warships, to Russian Navy, but that means we also, right now, cannot get in there. So it would be ideal if Turkey would open up the straits for other allies to come in. And we should do a freedom of navigation operation in the Black Sea. This is not an attack on Ukraine. This is international waters, international airspace. We should do that. I mean, we send ships right by Taiwan and the South China Sea all the time. Why aren't we doing that in the Black Sea? Romania should be asking for that, maybe even leading it. Secondly, we should look for every possible international format to hold Russia accountable. Why is Russia still on the Danube River Commission? Why is that? It's a small thing, but why did they even have a voice about what happens on the Danube River?
If they break all the rules.
Exactly. So I would look for ways to put pressure on them in that way as well. And then Romania, of course, is in a position to observe what's going on around Crimea, Sevastopol, helping. I imagine that Romania is already doing this. I don't know, but I would imagine they are. But to improve the intelligence sharing about what's happening out there so that we and the Ukrainians have perfect visibility about everything that's happening on its Black Sea coast, so that there's no surprises about amphibious operations, no surprises about what's where, and help provide targeting information so that Ukrainians can reach out and hit a Russian ship.
General Hodges, concluding this interview, and I thank you again for having this, do you think that the war in Ukraine, it's the start of a longer and greater war of Putin and Russia against NATO and against the Western world?
It will be if we don't fix it now. It will be if we don't fix it now. But we have an opportunity here. These next few weeks, 3 weeks, if we get serious, if we say we're going to win, we are going to make sure that Ukraine breaks the back of Russian forces, then we won't have to worry about this for years to come.
General Hodges, thank you so much for this interview.
Thanks for the privilege, Radu.